Hare Krishna, everyone. So we're going to continue this on. I hope you can hear the audio just fine. It's interesting how it shuts. This has happened a few times before, and the timing of when my internet shuts off is always very interesting. So the welcome, Gary. Okay, good. The timing of those is always very interesting. It's always when we're dealing with some topic along those lines, or mainly because those topics are confidential, and even when they're explained, they tend to be still misunderstood by people who are flooded with lust and illicit sex desire and things like this. So that's usually why those topics tend to not be discussed so much within devotional circles. But people need to understand that those things are factors and do exist. You just have to get into the pure versions of them. So the whole point of, like, celibacy is an act of gratefulness to Radha and Krishna. So what inspires one to practice celibacy in Krishna consciousness, it's not that you, okay, I practice celibacy, therefore I will get pure love of Radha and Krishna. No, it's the other way around. It's that you experience your loving relationship with Radha and Krishna in the pure version, then that inspires you to practice celibacy. Okay? So fear not. Do not get worried. A lot of people tend to get overly worried or overly, like, saddened or bugged by this, or afraid, like, oh, if I don't maintain celibacy or something, I can like not have any reciprocation from Radha Krishna whatsoever. It doesn't work like that. They actually reciprocate with you, and sometimes in a sensual, intimate manner and dreams and things like this, if that's what you're needing, to help inspire you to practice celibacy, to actually get to the pure version of relationship with them. So fear not. It's so a lot of times people get hung up on this when they hear about this sometimes, and they're like, oh, well, that means, if I don't practice celibacy or this or that, then I'm going to have so many problems in devotion. Look at me. I talk about this stuff all the time. I'm always talking about Krishna consciousness. This is practically what I do. Everybody I interact with, and this is my passion. It's what I love to do. My enthusiasm is always skyrocketed. Radha Krishna do reciprocate and appear, and have interacted with me in various ways, and they'll do the same with you. I'm sure in many ways too. And I quite often jack off a lot myself too still, and things like that. And so the point is, it's like the celibacy follows the actual experience of devotional service as a symptom of gratefulness to Radha and Krishna for their causeless affection. I hope that makes sense. Okay, so the point is to access Radha and Krishna's unconditional affection for you, which is always there, it's always present, and by doing so you discover what your eternal relationship with them is, in fact, actually. Welcome, Michael. So now, looks like there's 5 guys watching right now. 5 people watching. So we're going to continue on talking about Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And these discussions of these impersonalists and what they actually believe and teach is very interesting. So if you want more detail or info on that perverted reflection stuff about, okay, perverse illicit sex temporally, and then the real version of pure sex and transcendence, the first video I ever posted on YouTube called Temporal Lust versus Transcendental Pure Love, I deal specifically with that topic, actually, as the starting off of the entire video series. So the point to remember about all these Mayavadi philosophers, now Mayavadi means impersonalism. Basically, to reiterate, Mayavadis basically are those who believe that anything, any form whatsoever, okay, any personality, any form, is by definition and by nature limited in some way. That is Mayavadi philosophy, okay? It's very simple. So most people in the world are already Mayavadis, and they don't even know it. They don't even know there's a name for that philosophy, and they don't even know that it's been defeated already, many times over. So, and then a lot of times when people first come to Krishna consciousness, they were like, holy shit, I was actually a Mayavadi, and I adhered to that philosophy, and I had no idea that that's what my philosophy was. Mayavadi, so put this to memory, write it down if you need to. Mayavadi specifically is the wrong concoction in the brain, the wrong understanding that any form whatsoever or any personality whatsoever is by definition limited in some way. That is Mayavadi philosophy. Okay, so if you think that no matter how great a form is or no matter how divine a form is, that form is by definition in nature because there is form there limited, then you're a Mayavadi, and that's your philosophy. You're a Mayavadi in terms of your philosophical view towards the absolute truth, absolute person. So that philosophy has been defeated. Lord Chaitanya defeated them. And so I encourage you to read how and in what way Lord Chaitanya defeated their philosophies many times over. And also, so that is Mayavadi. Now, Brahmavadi, which we especially talk about and speak against in these video presentations all the time, Brahmavadi is a little bit different than Mayavadi, but it's pretty much the same thing. The difference between, and this is why it's such a subtle thing, since Mayavadis Mayavadis think that any and all forms, no matter how great, expansive, or divine, or whatever they are limited by definition and nature because they're formful. Okay? Brahmavadis, however, don't think about form that way. But they, in other words, they accept that there is a divine person or is a divine being who may have form and this and that, but they think that the formfulness of that divine person is co-equally existent with this impersonal existence. So in other words, they believe that the divine is both a person and a non-person at the same time. That's Brahmavadi philosophy, which is also impersonalism, because they don't clearly understand, they still don't understand transcendental form still. So they accept that there are some forms that are unlimited, all-pervasive and eternally existing, so they accept that fact, but they don't accept that those forms, they don't accept the actual deeper nature of those forms, nor do they understand that those forms are actually not impersonal at all, and that the impersonal concept is actually an illusory construct within the mind, that the all-light expands from the forms of the original persons, and not the other way around. So that's Brahmavadi. So you have Mayavadi and Brahmavadi. Now, Brahmavadi is going to be the one-world religion, and is the one-world religion right now, already, without people needing to be converted to it. Because if you analyze anybody's views of the absolute truth, their philosophies, their ideas, you can always narrow it down to either Mayavadi or Brahmavadi, and I say this very legitimately, in 95 up to 99% of cases. Okay? And this is no exaggeration in number. If you really dig in a person's ideology or how they philosophize things, you can always pinpoint it to either their philosophies, either Mayavadi or Brahmavadi. This is why Srila Prabhupada makes it very clear all philosophies are Mayavadi at the end of the day, basically. So they're all impersonalism at the end of the day. Philosophy in and of itself is by nature and definition impersonalism. Or I should say what people consider to be philosophy is. Real philosophy is personal in nature. But we're dealing with things. So yeah, I hope that that's fully clear now, what Mayavadi actually is and what Brahmavadi actually is, and why they're so prevalent in this world, and why they're also the one world religion, Brahmavadi specifically. See, because Brahmavadi basically caters to people who want personal devotion to God and have the personal conception, but in a way that still allows impersonalism to be there at the same time. That's the problem. That's what Brahmavadi does. So it's like this compromise between personalism and impersonalism. And when you get compromised, what do you get? You get impersonalism again. So it's, yeah. And nowadays, we're dealing with an actual more vicious and more subtle form of Brahmavadi. And I go over this in the video called Real Syncretism versus Syncretic Brahmavadi. Now, there's three types of Brahmavadi, and then Syncretic Brahmavadi is the version where they basically, they are devoted to Radha and Krishna, okay? Personally, with somewhat of a personal conception, but still there's a lot of impersonal ideas towards that in the back of their subconscious. That is syncretic Brahmavadi versus generalized Brahmavadi, where it's like, okay, we accept impersonalism, personalism, all mixed together as the same absolute thing. That's generalized Brahmavadi. And then there's syncretic Brahmavadi is, okay, we accept that the goddess and God are the all-pervasive eternal persons, the source of everyone and everything else, but we accept them along with the all-light, the all-impersonal absolute. But we choose to eternally worship Radha and Krishna in spite of thinking that that's the case. You see, that's syncretic Brahmavadi. And syncretic Brahmavadi is on top of that related to syncretism, or I should say the false version of syncretism, the way things are connected and all this other stuff like this, but without understanding how Radha and Krishna are the source of those things. So it creates this whole balled-up consciousness of, okay, everything's connected to Radha and Krishna's forms, blah, 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 back and forth. But Radha and Krishna's forms basically just get lost in this big mesh of how everything's connected. And then what it becomes is, okay, my philosophy is everything's connected. And then it now shifts away from Radha and Krishna again. You know, so that's the whole point. There's so many things to that require hours on end of that stuff, which is why I've done all the previous videos on it, actually, covering multiple hours, discussing all the little points of that stuff. So, so reading the Chaitanya Charitamrita, welcome Kakadidas, we'll understand that the Lord Chaitanya's form is the original source form of the personality of all of his other expansions. So Radha and Krishna and Lord Chaitanya, in their two alternate versions of Goloka, are eternally the one supreme person. So in many ways, it's actually easier to explain true monotheism to people when you just explain to people, yes, Lord Chaitanya is the original source form personality of Godhead, because that's true. That's 100% equally true to saying that Radha and Krishna are the original source forms personality of Godhead. But because people think temporally with their temporal logic and intellect, they can't process two individual forms as being one individual without thinking that it's duotheism, or it's basically male-female theism in some weird way. They can't understand how that is actually monotheism. But when you explain, okay, Lord Chaitanya, the single form, the goddess and God, one form, that's easier for a lot of people to understand, So, and this is part of the mercy of Lord Chaitanya. He makes a lot of things that are really difficult to understand easier to understand for people who otherwise wouldn't appreciate what he's saying. Hare Krishna. Welcome, Zach. So we're going to touch a little bit on what we're going to cover next week right now, because this has been a big thing that's been going on about the last couple months or so amongst a lot of devotees and stuff. And like I said, most of this stuff always takes hours to discuss because there's just so much to it. Like, if you answer simple answers to things, it usually doesn't get the full scope across of the full answer. So the expansions of Krishna are certain forms. So when most people read the scriptures, right, and they look at all these books, they see, okay, there's a giant, Krishna appears as a giant fish. Krishna appears as a half man, half lion. He appears as a boar. He appears as a beautiful woman. He appears as this and that. They get all these things in their head thinking that, oh, he's appearing like all these things. This seems like a fantasy novel mythology. It just seems symbolic, basically. Most people look at it that way. And so they see, oh, obviously the fish is symbolic of this. Obviously the boar is symbolic of this. Obviously the half man, half lion is symbolic of this. That's how most people see the forms of Krishna that he appears in as the avatars it takes. But what's really going on, actually, is the reason that Krishna appears in those forms originally to begin with, and also the reason that the zodiac in and of itself has similar forms involved there, of, the lion, all this other stuff, is actually a very specific reason. And that specific reason is what we're going to cover next week in full detail. But suffice it to say, to keep it very simple, is that it's because when Krishna expands, he's actually physically, transcendentally physically here, displaying visually the things that him and Sri Radha talk about and the things that happen intimately between them. But then he puts that into an actual form in front of them. So the most easy example to understand of this is Lord Nrsimhadeva. And we're going to go into all the avatars, why Krishna appears as those forms, and what he's meditating on when he's in those forms. So as we understand from the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Krishna in all of his expansions is meditating on Radha and Krishna also. And the Krishna is the soul of Paramatma as well. And the soul of his expansions also, on top of being Krishna himself. So, and Lord Chaitanya, same thing here. So a very simple example is when Krishna appears as Nrsimhadeva, the half man, half lion, with his claws, and he rips out the guts of Hiranyakashipu. That is actually the physical visual of what Radha and Krishna talk about and joke about in Goloka when they're lovemaking. So when the lovemaking is taking place, they're scratching each other's backs with their nails, which is exactly what Nrsimhadeva does. They're referring to Krishna when he's doing that as the supreme man-lion. So what does Krishna do? He appears in a man-lion form. Okay? Very simple to understand so far. And who is he ripping the guts apart of? What's the name of this demon he's tearing apart? Hiranya, gold, Kashipu, soft beds. So he's tearing apart what? He's ripping out golden ornaments from the cowherd girl's clothing when they're engaging in pure intercourse in Goloka. And what is he also tearing off? He's tearing up the soft bed that they're laying on. Very simple to understand. So when you understand this fact about the avatars of Krishna, then you will be inclined to actually worship the avatars of Krishna more, and then you will actually understand why the avatars of Krishna are so attractive and so transcendently sexy and pure and everything like this, including Nrsimhadeva, his boar form, and everything else, when you understand that the avatars are literally Krishna winking at Sri Radha and the gopis in Goloka, transcendence, in that he's hinting to them and the pure devotees, hey, I'm physically showing what the gopis joke with me about in Goloka. This is why it's specified that the first reading through the Bhagavatam, most people just read the stories, but they don't really understand why Krishna appears as those forms, though. They just look at it as, okay, Krishna just chooses to appear as that particular form, but they don't understand, like, why. But then when they understand, oh, it's because Sri Radha is actually wanting him to appear like that, with that form, to visually show this, to give her a laugh, that is actually why he appears like that. Then the second read through, you see the hidden encodings there, and you see Radha and Krishna's pastimes taking place, the intimate pastimes of Goloka. So instead of seeing your Nrsimhadeva rip up the guts of Hiranyakashipu, you're seeing him just visually display that and winking at Sri Radha that they're actually making love in Goloka. That's what you process the second read through. And then the third read, more and more layers into this. See? So that's one example. And then each of the avatars of Krishna, you guys can intuitively grasp and understand this clearly. It's not super complicated. But it is complicated for those who don't have it all written in front of their face, who basically are like obsessed with direct written references and all this stuff. But the point being, you guys get what I'm saying here. So the fish avatar, you can relate it to every one of those. You can relate to a specific intimate lovemaking interaction between Radha and Krishna. Every one of them, without exception. And so I encourage people to worship the avatars of Krishna. So Krishna is the half man, half lion. Is the boar. I encourage people to do this all the time. A lot of people get the wrong idea when I'm emphasizing so strongly Radha Krishna that I'm like trying to discourage them from fixating. No, it's like because I understand that the appreciation of Krishna's expansions and avatars increases when you understand their connection with Radha and Krishna and the order of operations. It actually increases. So you actually appreciate Nrsimhadeva more, and you're more inclined to worship him and be fixated on him because you know what he's meditating on. You see? You know that he's meditating on Radha and Krishna's intimate lovemaking. Nrsimhadeva is. And so you, with Nrsimhadeva, which is Krishna meditating on those pastimes that he has with Sri Radha, you appreciate him more. And you actually find spontaneous attraction to worship Nrsimhadeva more, and all the other avatars too. So please, my friends, don't ever get the wrong idea that because Radha and Krishna factually are the core source center, that's saying, okay, don't focus on the avatars. No, quite the opposite. That's actually saying focus on the avatars even more now that you're focused on Radha and Krishna as your center. Because there's no question of being distracted from Radha and Krishna if you're focusing on their avatars or expansions or whatever, when you understand the order of operations. No question of being distracted like this. It all becomes fun, actually. It all becomes very attractive. So... But, I'm saying all this stuff right now, but for this stuff to actually be fully realized and hit home, it has to be realized. I mean, I can say this stuff and speak it, but unless you directly experience what I'm talking about, which everybody can experience this and realize this, it takes you individually realizing this stuff, individually. Like, it's not going to come from me talking about it, necessarily. But at least you can get the general idea. So... Like when you're reading about Krishna appearing in these avatars and stuff, don't just look at it as, oh, Krishna's appearing and he's doing this, this, and this. Of course, that's happening also. So Krishna is literally appearing and ripping apart the guts of a literal physical demon also. So it's not only symbolic. The point is it's literally happening, okay? But you need to understand what Krishna is meditating on when he's doing it. And then in the process, he fulfills so many layers of other things also that are taking place. So that individual who took birth to fulfill the role of being that demon, Hiranyakashipu, had a backstory, has an eternal relationship with Krishna, and there's other stuff happening too. So Krishna fulfills layers of stuff every time he appears. He doesn't just do one thing and it just fulfills one purpose. No, there's layers of stuff going on when he is everything he does. So everything is factual and literal first and foremost, like actually happens. Secondarily to that, everything also that Krishna does is also secondarily symbolic, after the actual literal facts. Now, what's going on in the syncretist world of stuff, and this is why syncretic Brahmavadi is picking up, is that they're promoting the wrong idea that, oh, everything Krishna does and stuff is mainly predominantly symbolic, and all the personification of this and that. But they're basically trying to shift it all into, okay, it's all symbolic, it's all astrotheological, etc., and that's been refuted too. But it's funny how it works when, no matter how many times you discuss these things, people seem to just keep forgetting it over and over. Where Krishna isn't an astrotheological figure, and that's refuted by him repetitively in the scriptures over and over, and by what he actually does. So when Krishna appears, the stars actually change their positions completely to accommodate his appearance. So if Krishna was an astrotheological figure, he would just appear in line with how the stars were set up in a certain way already. The stars wouldn't change to suit him appearing. And the moon wouldn't change its state to suit his appearance also. Like the moon wasn't actually full that day, but became full because he appeared. You see? So that stuff doesn't happen with astrological figures. They don't change the universal structure of the cosmos when they appear, when Krishna did, actually. So you're dealing with the individual who is beyond matter, is beyond the universe, is beyond all this temporal stuff, coming in the universe and appearing within matter. And this is the part that the people who are trying to promote this syncretic Krishna as an astrotheological figure concoction in their heads, they're claiming this because they haven't read those parts of the scriptures that refute that idea, actually. So Krishna is very clever. He's not going to allow little loopholes to be left where it's like, oh, okay, I know people are going to think this about me, blah, blah, blah. Now, another part that's really interesting about this, when the asuras that are fighting Krishna in these various forms see him appearing like this, so when they see him appearing as the boar, when they see him appearing as they always have this like mindset like, okay, because in most cases the asuras know to some degree or another that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but they still have their own concoctions of the nature of Godhead and the nature of the Absolute. So, for example, when Hiranyakashipu's brother, Hiranyaksha, which means golden eyes, saw the boar, okay, the boar form of Krishna appearing to basically slay him with his club and stuff, and to lift the flat plane earth disk out of the water, which it had fallen into, Hiranyaksha, basically the first thing he did was he insulted him and he scoffed at him. He says, you're supposedly the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but you're appearing in this ridiculous form of a boar. So that's the first thing he said to him, actually. So think about it. Any modern person that sees, any modern atheistically inclined or demonic person who sees supposedly God, right, or what they see as supposedly God appearing as like a boar, the first thing they're going to say also is, oh, you're supposedly the Supreme Personality, you're supposedly God, but you're appearing as a boar, and they would start laughing or scoffing. That's what the demon did when Krishna appeared like that. And then what does he do? He kills him, right? So Krishna, as Varaha, the boar, kills the demon, kills the asura. But so the insults of the demons are actually as pleasurable to Krishna as the praises of the devotees. Because in the cases of those demons, I should say the praises of certain demons, I should say. So because Krishna is transcendental, any interaction that takes place with him, he accepts as a loving interaction. So because he's all pure. So anything you say or do or interact with him directly, he takes as an offering of love and devotion, even if on the external plane it is inimical and aggressive and hateful and stuff. But that's with Krishna directly. He does take insult and offense when you say things that are unkind to his devotees, though. So there's a distinction there between being a pastime demon with Krishna directly and then supposedly insulting him, which he accepts as a worshipful praise, and then by killing you, he transfers you back to paradise, etc. And there's a distinction between that and actually insulting one of his devotees or going out of your way to insult Krishna in hatefulness, not understanding who he actually is and not appreciating him, basically. There is a difference. Because those asuras who do that type of insulting, they at least understand to some degree the supreme nature of Sri Krishna, and there's some degree of legitimate appreciation on some level in their hearts or minds towards him. Okay, whereas if somebody's just arrogant and atheistic and just vile, and then they start insulting Krishna, that's not going to help them. Krishna personally takes that still as a worshipful praise. He doesn't take it as a curse, but usually when they do that, their consciousness towards devotees is also negative and aggressive and hateful, and that's the problem. So literally, if a person's consciousness is 100% fixated on Krishna alone, even if it is less than ideal in anger or envy or this or that, if it's only on Krishna, right, and not directed towards the devotees, that anger, then the person becomes ultimately purified. But if the anger is directed towards Krishna and his devotees, then the person just goes to the hellish worlds, hellish planets. Very significant to remember this point. Hare Krishna. Thanks, Zach. I appreciate it. So I'm glad you're having fun with this and enjoying this. So I hope you guys are following me so far. And if you guys are curious about this, the whole Krishna-Vishnu dynamic, we've covered that in really elaborate detail. Why that is. We've got diagrams of the explanations from Lord Chaitanya himself, Lord Brahma, how Krishna expands, why he does so in the four-armed forms, why four arms, all these types of things. So, so the point for everybody to remember is whatever form of Krishna you prefer to worship or focus your attention on, understanding the order of operations correctly from Radha and Krishna and why those forms are those forms, okay, will give you more appreciation for those forms you're already attracted to. A great example of this. So Hanuman, because people will ask this question logically, of course. Hanuman, the half man, half ape, and that's his preferred form, okay, one of his preferred forms eternally. As Hanuman, he is eternally preferring to worship and fixate his consciousness on Lord Ramachandra, which is the form of Krishna that appeared about 1 million years back. And yes, there is an exact date, hour, time to his appearance, and millions of years back. We're talking that specific does exist in the Vedic texts. And then, so Hanumanji, even though he knows the order of operations, that Radha and Krishna are the source of them expanding as Ramachandra and Sita Devi and things, he understands correctly that his eternal preference, he still chooses to be preferred and focused on Lord Ramachandra. And his understanding of Radha and Krishna simply increases his appreciation of Lord Ramachandra. It doesn't change or diminish it in the least. In fact, there was actually a dynamic between Lord Chaitanya regarding this exact point, where there were devotees he interacted with who he was telling, okay, worship Radha and Krishna, focus on Radha and Krishna completely, and chant their holy names completely like this. And certain devotees he talked to like this, they were like, you know what, we appreciate what you're saying, we love and respect what you're saying, but we cannot shift our focus or attention from these forms of God that we're fixated on. So whether it's Ramachandra or Vishnu or whatever, and Lord Chaitanya actually appreciated this because he understood that their attraction to those forms was genuine and legitimate. And to where if you have a preference for one of Krishna's forms, there is nothing and no one, period, that can change that preference. But a lot of people have had the wrong idea over the years that the only way you can maintain such a preference is if you see that that specific form of the Supreme Lord is the source form of the other forms. That's not the case at all, actually. You absolutely don't have to see it that way for them to maintain the center of your focus. This is a very, very common misconception, especially for people coming in newer to Krishna consciousness. It's very common. And it's understandable why they have that misconception, because it's basically they're like thinking, okay, well, if I know that there's someone else who's like infinitely more beautiful in the source of even that form, then that means by default, if I know about that person, then I'm naturally going to be more attracted to that person. So most people think that, okay, by default, that automatically means I'm going to be more attracted to Radha and Krishna over and above Rama or Vishnu or whatever. That's not what it means, actually. It means that you'll appreciate Radha and Krishna more, and you'll actually appreciate that expansion more. Because in transcendence, there is no less, there is only more. You see what I'm saying? So there's no question of any of Krishna's forms being less at all, in any way, shape, or form, like there is in the temporal world. Like, temporally, when one thing is less, something else is more. That's how temporal reality works. That's not how transcendent reality works. So if you have an eternal preference for a specific form of Krishna, that preference, if you have it, is not going to change. And if that preference does change, it's simply a genuine change of your preference. And it doesn't mean you're neglecting that form at all, because all of Krishna's forms equally appreciate you and love you and reciprocate with you. So the point is, don't ever mistakenly think in terms of, oh, I have something less when you're in transcendence than somebody else. Because there's no such thing as less in reality. There's only ever more and more and more, ever increasing appreciation. Okay? So a great example I always give of this is my tendency, at least as far as I understand right now, my current eternal preference. Now, everything related to Krishna is eternal, so it's not within the realm of time. So even if something shifts or changes within that transcendent preference dynamic, it's still within the realm of eternity, within reality. It's not that it's not like within a thing within time that it's a preference because it's an illusory material thing. No. Your preference eternally can change, and you can have and shift your preference as many times as you want in transcendence. That's the whole point. That's the whole point of variegatedness. Like Krishna's has infinity of forms, and even the forms of Radha and Krishna are easily able to appear if you prefer to see them with like red hair or different color eyes or something like that, different from the standard blue and maroon colored eyes, and the yellow black skin. They can easily appear in a version of Goloka for you where they appear like that, but where you still understand that their original core form visually is the yellow skin and the blackish skin, even though you prefer to see them as the whitish skin or the other colors, because all those colors are contained within that blackish blue, those transcendental colors. You see? And like we explained before, the way transcendental colors work is that they contain all of the other colors within them already. It's not the same as material colors. So it's not, when you see yellow in the spiritual world or paradise, it's not like the yellow of the material world that it's only yellow and the other colors aren't there. No, it's like all the colors are there. You're just preferring to visually see yellow at that point in time, right? And there is an order of operations that's accurate, but it's not a it's not a hierarchy in the sense that we understand temporal hierarchy. Okay. So when anything is talked about as being above, or it's actually more specifically referring to as deeper in terms of intimacy. It's not referring to like a pyramid scheme thing or a pyramid structure thing. Visually on pictures, it can be drawn out as like a pyramid so people can understand the concept better, okay? But that's not actually the case. It's not like a pyramid structure in terms of when you're dealing with the spiritual world. All of those ideas towards that are materialistic ideas, okay? When people think in terms of superior, inferior, like that. Those words are used, but you have to understand that everything within transcendence has to do with intimacy, depth of intimacy. It doesn't have to do with like a rank board of like, okay, I'm up here, you're down here type thing. It's more like, okay, I'm interacting with you like this intimately, and then there's various degrees of that intimacy, and then other interactions are slightly less intimate in nature. That's all, you know? So it's like one interaction you may be having actual intercourse, another interaction you may be formally bowing down and worshiping. It's like they're same in terms of transcendental value, but one is just more intimate in nature than the other, you see? But there's no less value of either of them, okay? So basically, it's very important to understand like this. So you don't fall into the trap of getting some weird hierarchical thing. Oh, you know, we're devoted to Radha and Krishna, therefore we're superior to those devoted to Krishna. It's not like that. Or, you know, superior to those devoted to these other, like, expansions of Vishnu or whatever. Not how it works. Just always catch yourself and pay attention to that. Like, your material mind will always try to creep back in those, like, materialistic hierarchical construct ideas towards things. And people always get that wrong idea about the living entity's relationship dynamic with Krishna. When they hear about like the master servant, they start thinking in terms of like, oh, material master and servant. So they think like, okay, bowing down, serving, being submissive, dominated over type thing. They start thinking that way. But that's a material way of looking at things. That's not the actual relationship, you see. It's not that you're in a servant relationship like by force that you have to. No, it's like you're voluntarily in that relationship because that's what you want to be in, like, and that's why you're there. So you're not in anything in reality that you don't want to be in terms of relationship, position, etc. So like a lot of people get these very strange ideas that are also very common, where they tend to think that, oh, you know, I'm a living entity because just happenstantially Krishna is God and I come from God, therefore, oh, great, that's just the bargain I get, basically. I really want to be God, but I can't. That's not how it works. It's you're a living entity because you eternally want to be a living entity, an individual from Krishna, and your wanting to do that is connected to you factually being a living entity eternally. It's not that, like, okay, Krishna is God and just happenstantially he has all these infinite living beings come from him, and you know, that basically he drew the card of being God and you drew the card of being a living entity, not God. Oh, tough luck. But a lot of people get these weird subconscious ideas coming into Krishna consciousness, and they will express this verbally and stuff. And you clarify this, and but it's actually kind of funny and comical. It's like you just have to clarify. No, it's not like that. It's not that. It's because the fact is we're eternal living entities. Why? Because we don't ever actually desire to be God directly. We sometimes do desire, concoctedly, to be our own version of who we think God is. That's a different thing from desiring to directly be God, okay? And sometimes that's worded on paper as, okay, the desire to be God. But no, it's actually the desire of what you perceive or who you perceive God to be within your framework of eternal individuality. Therefore, it's always a concoction when it comes to the individual living entity thinking about what it means to be God, because it's not actually who God is, you see. So therefore, when a living being thinks that that's what they desire, what they're actually desiring is their own concoction of, oh, I want to experience being or in other words, I want to focus on supreme enjoyment myself as my focus, instead of giving that to others, instead of absorbing in the supreme enjoyment I'm already experiencing as my focus. And we go into this more elaborately in other videos too. What the nature of temporal existence is, why we're here, how that works, and things like that. Once again, these things are not within the realm of the temporal brain's processing of them, stuff like that. So, so basically, let's discuss a little more. So, my friends who are still watching, let's engage the conversation a little bit, and go more into comments and or questions, etc. If you have any comments on this stuff, does anything need further clarification? Does it make sense so far? Thumbs up, anything like that, in terms of making sense. We're on the same page. We get what's rocking here. Okay, here we go. This is very significant. Check this out, guys. This is cool. So read this. Please read the teachings of Lord Chaitanya. This one right here, if you can see it. Well, it's kind of, lighting's kind of weird, but there you go. Lighting's better that way. Okay. Now, the Lord instructed Srila Rupa Goswami to write the transcendental literature named Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, the science of devotional service, indicating therein the substance of the 5 transcendental relationships. It is explained there how the transcendental quality of Shanta Rasa, neutrality, in the shape of unflinching faith in Krishna, is further developed to the form of Dasya Rasa, the servant mentality, with the spirit of service, and then to Sakya Rasa, friendship, for undeterred fraternity, so pure friendship with Krishna, your best bud type of relationship, and can still be more developed in the transcendental flavor of paternal love, so seeing Radha and Krishna as your children that you love, with the sense of maintaining the Lord. All culminates, pay very close attention to this, all culminates in the highest platform of conjugal love, intimate love, wherein all the different transcendental relationships exist simultaneously. Boom. So therefore, conjugal love, the intimate love, the romantic love with Krishna, with Radha and Krishna, is the ultimate goal of devotional service. In terms of, if you want to go to the deepest of the deep of the deep, and you find that that's what your eternal preference is, then you go in that direction. Many individuals find that their eternal preference is one of those other ones, that it's neutrality, dasya rasa, fraternity. And you'll find it's always genuine, because it's always unique, that you won't feel envious or jealous of other people in any way, shape, or form, and you'll be completely satisfied in how you're attracted to Radha and Krishna without even the slightest desire or urge to shift or change that type of relationship. And that's an indication of what your eternal preference is and who you literally are, your eternal form, etc. Some people, they have to have the conjugal relationship, and that's because that's their eternal relationship preference. I should say that's their eternal main preference. Others, they have a different eternal main preference, like Sakya Rasa or something like that. And yeah, because a lot of people think it's like, oh, conjugal love, it's just conjugal love and intimacy. No, it actually contains all the other types of relationships. So the cowherd girls with Krishna, when they're intimate with him, they also have those feelings towards him of being his parent, of being his best friend, of being his servant, and of being neutral with him at the same time of their hardcore focus of the intimate love as well. So it's inclusive of all those other relationships. And it's very, very fascinating, actually. Krish, you're saying, I've heard from proponents of evolution that the Vedas confirm evolution because each avatar appears as a more complex being than the last. Are they mistaken in concluding? That's actually really funny. The simple answer is yes, they're mistaken in concluding so. However, when you're what the evolution they're talking about, and once again, this is where context comes in, is macroevolution, where a species actually changes into another species over time. That's a completely hogwash, bogus, fake concept. Not true. The real evolution, the way it works, is a different type of evolution. It's not that. You're dealing with two factors. So within the temporal realm alone, you're dealing with microevolution, which is adaptation within a species, where a species can change and shift its form and features as time goes on, but never turn into a completely different species. Never. No. But adapting within their species, basically. So you might have weird, wild adaptations like huge tails and all these weird, crazy things, but it's still the same species, and they'll still revert back to those original features given different environmental conditions, etc. Microevolution. is correct, not macroevolution. So when most people say evolution, they're talking about macroevolution. And then they try to trip people up by saying, oh, there's species that adapt. That's actually evolution. Blah. It's like no, that's microevolution. There's a difference. So they try to bunch it all in as just one word when they're two different things. So all of the species have always existed. This is very clear in the Vedas. There's 8,400,000 species to be specific, and in fact, there's actually 400,000 human species alone. So what to speak of the other 8 million? Just amongst human species, there's 400,000 different human species, of which we only know just a few right now, like a handful of them. And then you're talking about in so-called modern science, they only have in like the thousands or maybe max tens of thousands, and a lot of them are speculated species. They're not even close to touching on the number of species the Vedas confirm. So, what's really interesting about this, the way it works, is there's 3 modes of material nature. You times 3 by itself over and over and over. You eventually get to 8,400,000. So you're dealing with the ways the modes are times on each other and combined, etc. See? So, so basically, yeah, depending on how the 3 modes, goodness, so balance, lethargy, and hyperactivity combine in the consciousness and the physiology, that determines the actual type of species you run into. In human society, we have a high ratio of the mode of passion and a decent amount of goodness involved there, or I should say balance there, which allows us to come close to transcendence and understand our relationship with God. In most of the other species, they have a high concentration of ignorance, or I should say lethargy and passion, without the goodness, though. So they're not without the balance. They're just instinctual consciousness. So there's something very significant I was going to talk about regarding Lord Chaitanya's pastimes here. It's actually very interesting and quite amusing, in fact. So let's see here. Pick it up in just a second. Okay, we're at the 41-minute mark. Looks like everybody's offline at the moment. That's okay. I'm just going to keep rocking anyway. 42 minutes. Let's see here. What's that I was going to cover? It'll come to me in just a second. Let's see. What was it? 5. Hit it when I have those brain farts at very opportune moments like this. Okay. Here we go. So, the pure devotee does not desire to live on the same planet with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He does not desire the same opulence as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and he does not desire to have the same form as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He does not desire to live along with him side by side. Neither does he desire at any time to merge into the existence of the Supreme Person, even if these things are offered by God to the devotee. This is very interesting, because the pure devotee understands that they're always in Goloka, right? And because they understand this, they don't desire all of those other things with Krishna, because they have the deepest level of understanding, right? The people who aren't at that pure devotee level to that degree, they desire these specific things in relationship with Krishna, because there's some ever microscopic little amount of desire for one's own gratification with Krishna. But, oh, that's right. It was related to this question you asked right here, actually, about the avatars. So what's funny about this is the time scales of when the avatars appear. We're dealing with billions of years back. So we're dealing with billions of years back in terms of the appearances of these various avatars, billions and millions of years back. Like, the cosmos has been changed many times over since a lot of these avatars have appeared. In Lord Ramachandra's appearance alone was 1 million years ago. And what's really interesting about this is that the so-called missing links and all this stuff, it's a bunch of hogwash, because actually you had half man, half apes as an entire group living with, as a fully separate group during the time of Lord Ramachandra, coexisting with humans in their own kingdoms and things like this, where they had basically half ape, half human forms and features. And they actually fought with Lord Ramachandra against Ravana and things like this. So people trying to say, oh, look, it's apes. No, there's literally a species of apes that has always existed in the universe that's half human and half ape that have always been here. It wasn't a thing of like evolution where it's like, okay, they started off like a human or an ape and they devolved or evolved. It's not exactly like that. No, it's actually they were there eternally. It just depends on where in the cosmos, what planet, what location. That's really all there is to it. And yeah, so as far as that goes, and what's funny about it is the theory of evolution has been disproven. Darwin himself actually renounced the theory of evolution towards his later years. This is a fact a lot of people don't even realize. So the fact it's still being touted and promoted and blasted out, it's literally just being used as a brainwash tool for the world now. It's not being used for any other reason. That's all the evolutionary crap is being used for anymore. So when it comes to that topic and so many others, we're, as a human species, if you want to talk about evolution or devolution, we're in fact actually physiologically, technically de-evolving within the microevolutionary fold. So we're still the same species, we're still humans, we're gradually becoming a more goblin-like, shorter, nastier version of ourselves, basically. So a person who didn't know better, they would say, okay, we went from being like 48-foot tall beings who covered the planet, taking huge strides across land and stuff, like being gigantic, billions of years back, and then we've gradually gotten down to like being 6 feet tall, and eventually towards the end of this age, we're actually going to be like little tiny pygmy-sized people, like, 3-4 feet tall max on average, if that even, and then all the trees and everything is going to be shorter and stunted too. The planet's going to be the same size, so the whole planet's going to seem even bigger to those people then at that point. Whereas in the past, the plane disk we're on right now seemed much smaller to people. And this is why distances were covered so much easier by those gigantic humans, because they were on the same size Earth plane disk, but when you go back to Satya Yuga, they were like 36, 48 feet tall. And we're talking about just within the human species alone, and they were hyper more advanced, way more beautiful, way more attractive than people are now. So they were practically like godlike beings at that point in time. But we've within microevolution, we've de-evolved from that point to where we are now. So it's not evolution that's happening amongst humans, it's the opposite. Devolution's happening. We started off practically as gods and are becoming more and more goblin-like as time goes on. And this is due to disrespect of parents, illicit sex especially, and everything that follows, meat eating, intoxication, all that stuff. And it stems from impersonal philosophy to begin with. That's actually what began the decay of human society, was impersonalism. And actually started with Hiranyakashipu. So before, there was a time in the universe where everybody was hyper-personal in devotion to Krishna. And this is why it was required in the past that you had to be you had to go into deep meditation to actually transcend matter, because you were basically just put in an alternate version of paradise, which is the temporal universe. So way back then, meditation was the method because people had no excuse to not perform meditation. Nowadays, it's completely the opposite. It's like we have every excuse not to meditate because everything is so hectic and hellish, and it's hard as hell to actually properly meditate in any way. And even if we do meditate in this age, that's still not actually the process for this age to transcend matter anyway, for so many reasons. So the point being is that like the less utopian the world actually is, the more practical the means for transcending matter is also, because Krishna is very practical. So just like we're practical, Krishna is the supreme practical individual. So what could be simpler than just spontaneously saying the names of Radha and Krishna every day, focusing on their forms, and associating everything you do and say with their names and forms? Very simple. No need to specifically sit in one spot and meditate, although that can help if you're meditating on their forms or chanting their names while doing so. Like sitting in one place and doing it like that, like they had to do in previous ages to transcend matter, is no longer the requirement. So we've actually have it a lot easier than people did in the past to transcend matter. Like in beings transcending the material universe was very rare in previous ages for that reason, like fully transcending matter, because you had to like seriously go hardcore into meditation mode on the form of Krishna. And and this was in an age when it was convenient for people to do so. Everything was paradise. They had all the food they wanted, so they had every reason to sit in meditation and not waste their time doing other stuff. Whereas today we're dealing with the exact opposite situation of that age. Shalom Prabhu. Oh, Hare Krishna. See you later, Zach. Have a good one. And tonight I might just even keep on doing a series of like different little points and stuff like that. I'm just having a good time, So, so yeah. Anything else? Who is it that's still watching? Chris, maybe. Chris, Gary, Sham. Feel free to chime in if you'd like, or any other questions regarding that. anything of that sort. Yeah, when you guys see why Krishna appears as these different avatar forms, it's going to be such a trip. You're going to be like, holy crap, it's it's actually really trippy and really easy to understand when you just at the face of it, But people tend to overcomplicate things. Oh, Kakadidas, it's you. Wonderful, wonderful, my friend. Hare Krishna. And like I said, don't feel obliged to have to say or anything. I know it's a late night and where you're at and stuff. I'm just going to keep going anyway here. So wonderful. It's interesting the pages that Krishna arranges we turn to. So 124. The supreme lover is Krishna, and he is situated in Vrindavana. The supreme beloved is Radharani. As Krishna is the supreme lover, there are 64 important qualifications of Krishna, on hearing which the devotee takes transcendental pleasure. The characteristics of Krishna are explained in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Nectar of Devotion, as follows. The first one is body is well constructed. Now, this is very cool, Kakati. So this actually goes fully in depth into all of the qualities that Krishna has, and he's the only one that has those last 4 qualities, actually. Vishnu and all of his expansions have up to the 60 qualities. Krishna has those extra 4, beyond those 60 qualities. And this is in the Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, and they're laid out very specifically. So this is very key here. After listing all those 64 qualities, which we could read, but I want to get to some key points related to this, actually, more so. The very first thing that's mentioned, his body is well constructed. So his form is the very first factor that's mentioned. Form, boom, right there. And that's the very first thing. And then everything else follows that, basically, in terms of descriptions, etc. And then we're dealing with the 25 transcendental qualities that Sri Radha has in which and how she controls Krishna. So the way Radharani controls Krishna as a puppet is going to especially be the topic of next week. How she controls Krishna as the puppet in terms of how he expands and how she makes him expand, how she wants him to, etc. Like this. Fascinating stuff. Yeah, but Radharani can control even Krishna by her transcendental qualities. So that lists her qualities. Okay, let's see. So Krishna and Radharani are both transcendently qualified, and both are attractive for each other. But still, in that transcendental attractiveness, Radharani is better than Krishna. This attractiveness of Radharani is the transcendental taste in conjugal love. So check this out. The attractiveness of Radharani is the transcendental taste in conjugal love. So it's the attractiveness of her form that causes the devotees to be immersed in conjugal love with Radha and Krishna, either as gopis or as facilitators there. Thank you, Hare Krishna. Yes. Yeah, people are always asking for scriptural references, which I'm always happy to give, but my personal nature tends to be I just prefer to wing it and relay stuff that have already been read in the past and things like that, and just kind of explain it in ways that I'm inspired to explain it. But I appreciate the scriptures very deeply also, and the fact that it's useful to refer to scriptures, and because that's what a lot of people like to see. Because everything we talk about is always there's specific scriptural references for all of it. It's just a matter of where, in which scripture, and which depth of scripture we're talking about, basically. So this is very cool. Similarly, there are transcendental tastes in the flavors of servitude, friendship, and other relationships with Krishna. They can be described as follows, with reference to the context of Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. Let's see here. And then we go into, I'd like to do some of these videos with you too, Kaki. I love those Nectar of Devotion videos we did, or Nectar of Instruction, whichever one it was. Got to do some of those again, brother. That'd be great. And let's see here. So, for the non-devotee, it's very difficult to understand the taste of devotional service. Now remember, when he says non-devotee, he's talking about someone who's not devoted to Krishna. This is made very clear in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. So people basically claiming that they're devoted to Krishna's expansions, but not actually devoted to Krishna specifically, understanding that they're the source of the expansions, isn't really actually practicing devotional service in the full context of the word. So there's different degrees of depth of devotional service within that fold, but the full depth of devotional service, in terms of the full emphasis, is what Chaitanya describes elsewhere in the scripture here. So only one who has completely taken shelter of the lotus feet of Krishna, specifically, and whose life is merged in the ocean of devotional service, can understand this transcendental relish. So it's very interesting that the understanding comes after completely taking shelter in the lotus feet of Krishna, specifically, and whose life is merged in the ocean of devotional service, can understand this transcendental relish. And this is why the people who are inclined towards Paramatma, yoga, meditation, or impersonalistic concoctions and things can never understand any of this. Nor can the people who understand that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but who still don't understand his Vigraha, his form. So Satchit Ananda Vigraha, like we talked about in the previous discussion, the fourth realization beyond the realization of Krishna's form is realization, or I should say beyond realization of Krishna, is realization of the nature of his form in relationship to Sri Radha. That's Vigraha realization. And then that's where realization of Chaitanya comes in, which is even more rare than realization of Radha and Krishna. So Lord Chaitanya's appearance is so rare, actually, even for the devotees who are devotees of Radha and Krishna, even for the devotees who do make it back to Goloka. Lord Chaitanya's appearance and interaction with the living entity is still rare, even for those individuals. So Lord Chaitanya only appears, once in either a lifetime of Brahma or a day of Brahma. Both are huge time frames. So it's one of the two. I'm trying to remember which one it was. But the point is, Lord Chaitanya appears once in like these huge, insanely vast time periods, where Krishna actually appears far more frequently than he does as Lord Chaitanya. Not sure to what degree I can commit to it at the moment, though. Yeah, and that's fine. And like we always talk about, preference for an expansion of Krishna is completely fine and actually will increase with understanding the order of operations. That increases and doesn't decrease. And then he explains further here that let's see here. Yeah, because I noticed, like at first glance, it seemed a lot of people may assume wrongly that we're discouraging them from fixation on the expansions, which is not the case. And pretty much the entirety of next week's presentation will make that abundantly clear. People's appreciation of the expansions will skyrocket next week for Krishna, understanding this thing. Let's see here. So, yeah, and Lord Chaitanya taught Sanatana Goswami how to live in the material world in complete relationship with Krishna, and he taught him also that there is no necessity of dry renunciation at the same time. And of course, the purport is that in the present day there are many persons who accept the renounced order of life without any spiritual advancement. This applies to both inside and outside eye movement. It's going on, that type of thing. Lord Chaitanya did not approve of such acceptance of sannyasa without perfect knowledge in Krishna consciousness. Actually, we find that there are many so-called sannyasis who are acting like less than ordinary men, in other words, engaging in illicit sex, masturbating behind closed doors, etc., yet are passing themselves off as the renounced order of life. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu did not accept such hypocrisy, and he taught Sanatana Goswami to write elaborately on the subject matter in his different books. So, so basically, what's interesting is the standards of an ordinary man that Prabhupada is talking about here is a man who actually doesn't masturbate or jack off ever for any reason whatsoever. That's actually the standard of an ordinary man, even according to the Vedas. So what to speak of a guy who does masturbate or engage in illicit sex here and there, that's considered less than the level of an ordinary man. So in the vast overwhelming majority of cases, people who have accepted sannyasa have engaged in illicit sex at some point, and therefore that disqualifies them for sannyasa. Because they're not even behaving at the level of ordinary men at that point, but in Kali Yuga, our standards have gotten so insanely low and depraved and things like this that any degree whatsoever of like celibacy is considered like some amazing mystical feat, basically, So when in the past that was really just the standard. Most people were actually celibate most of the time and were able to do so without a problem. And that was the case with both men and women. At least the chunk of their lives was celibate, basically. So, let's see here. Yeah, man. Okay. Oh, check this out. Yep. Goloka is bigger than all the material and spiritual planets put together. So it's what's funny about this Kakadi Das is like, I always laugh. It's like so many things I talk about, right? People think I'm exaggerating, like a lot of times, if I'm not like directly, immediately right there referring to the scripture. And it's like, all of these things that I'm talking about are like 100% of them talked about in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, or in the teachings of Lord Chaitanya, which is actually the summary, the brief overview summary of his teachings. All this stuff's contained in. What to speak of the actual Chaitanya Charitamrita directly, that's an insane slew of more detailed information on this stuff. So it always cracks me up. It's like, oh, you're concocting something when you say Goloka is everywhere and beyond. It's like, it's said right here by Chaitanya himself. It's like, you know what I mean? So it's like, if people think I'm pulling it out of my rear end, then my rear end must be bigger than all the universes put together then. You know what I'm saying? Both the material and the spiritual. It's like, wow, I must be pretty big then, man. It's kind of a flattering statement, I guess. You know? Oh, man, it's funny to think about, you know? So, let's see here. Yeah, the whole material universe is Devi Dham, and above Devi Dham, where, you know, Mahamaya Devi, etc. And then welcome, Nicholas Paris. It's always a fun conversation with you, my friend. Let's see here. And then above Devi Dham, there is Shiva Dham, okay, where Lord Shiva and his wife Parvati eternally reside. In that planetary system in the spiritual sky, where numerous spiritual planets known as Vaikunthas are situated, and above them, there is Krishna's planet known as Goloka. Goloka means the planet of the cows. Krishna is very fond of cows, and therefore his abode is known as Goloka. Simple enough. Also the shelter of the senses, etc. Goloka is bigger than all the material and spiritual planets put together. So you're talking about spiritual planets which are infinite in size and scope, and when sizes are described for them, it's only talking about sizes relationally to one another. Just like when the living entity is described as 1/10,000th size of the tip of a hair, it's just referring to the relational visual comparison between when the living entity is conditioned, surrounded by a body, surrounded by layers of external conditioning, etc. But when you go down and the body's not there anymore and you're in transcendence, the living entity isn't that size, 1/10,000th size of the tip of a hair. So you're talking about infinite-sized planets that are infinite in scope, the Vaikunthas. You're talking about all of them put together, combined, and Goloka is bigger than all of them. So that's insanely huge. Like, that's beyond insanely huge in terms of size. Because Goloka is what? Beyond the concept of size altogether. There you go. And so here we go. In the prayer of Harivamsha, Indra admitted that he could not understand the situation of Goloka even by asking Brahma. So this is just showing that the intellect, even of the demigods, so no intellect can process Goloka. No intellect. I'm not even attracted to human bodies. It was 100% jnana yoga that helped me accomplish that. Well, I am 100% certain, Kakari Das, that you had bhakti. So in your case, it was genuine jnana yoga, in the sense that being jnana yoga, it was actually jnana with bhakti. Okay? So jnana in the right direction mixed with bhakti, which is correctly how jnana is utilized. So that's beautiful. And this is a great example that when intelligence, knowledge, and information is combined and used for the purpose of bhakti, then it's jnana yoga right there. And that is actually what leads to celibacy and perfection thereof. However, remember this, my friend Kakari Das. There have been mystics in the past who understand Krishna, who are able to transcend matter, do all these other things. Maitreya Muni is a good example of this. But they were able to transcend attraction to human bodies, the external world, and all these other things. However, their devotion was still tinged and mixed with jnana. It still wasn't to the level of jnana shunya bhakti. Now, I'm simply saying this as a warning to all of us, myself included, to all devotees, to avoid the trap of bhakti, which always has jnana as a tag-along with it, okay? Which won't allow one to fully get to Goloka. But always keep one at the max in Vaikuntha, which is fine. I mean, you can make it to Vaikuntha, but still, even at that point, there's still that ever so slight potential of going back more into jnana than bhakti. There's always that potential with that situation. So the point is, there have been beings and asuras and all sorts of individuals in the past who have accomplished transcending attraction to human bodies for huge periods of time. Okay, in terms of like not being agitated by sex desire, practicing celibacy for hundreds, thousands of years, and even then, in those cases, they still hadn't come to every case, the devotional platform, or even the non-devotional platform. So it's important for everyone to remember, like, there are ways to pull off being fully celibate without necessarily having pure devotion to Radha and Krishna as a factor. You can pull it off temporarily. It can be pulled off. for periods of time. Well, what ends up happening is there's always at some point Krishna makes some arrangement where there's some form, some personality, some individual where you're attracted emotionally and physically to them, more specifically to their emotionally more attracted to them. And that's how the demigoddesses attract the sages in meditation on Krishna. It's because they're emotionally attractive on very deep levels beyond the physical attraction. So, and they know how to really touch on the meditators and the devotees' subtle desires of intimacy and things like that beyond physical attraction. That's how the apsaras sent by Indra operate like that. They operate very deeply on the mental emotional level, which can trap even the deepest sage in meditation. So this is why the principle of dependence on Radha and Krishna is always key here, because there's always that potential if we're doing celibacy and we ever think in our heads that, oh, we're celibate because of some other reason from Radha and Krishna's causeless mercy, then that subtle thinking in the back of our mind can at any time lead us back into indulging in sex again. So, which is very good to remember. So, even asking Lord Brahma. So even Indra couldn't understand this, even asking Lord Brahma. And then Lord Brahma himself even explains that he can't understand this. So it's like we're talking about things beyond understanding, actually, beyond knowledge. But you still get them, you feel me? You actually still understand these things about Radha and Krishna beyond understanding itself. So understanding really isn't even the correct word. We're within the realm of Radha and Krishna. So it's like the term I use is inherent grasp, basically, beyond knowledge. So it's basically with pure devotion, you either inherently grasp the concepts or you don't, There's no question of intellectualizing the way into them. It's really just, okay, we can intellectualize up to a certain point, and then we have to jump past intellectualizing at some point, to get there, basically. Otherwise, we'll notice we always fall back into the confusion thing or that stuff again. Wonderful, wonderful. Yeah, this is very key stuff, very interesting. Okay, so those who are devotees of Narayana, another expansion of Krishna, become situated in the Vaikuntha planets. But it is very difficult to reach the Goloka planet. Now, this is Prabhupada being very emphatic about this, and Chaitanya himself actually is very clear about this. Very difficult to reach the Goloka planet. It's actually way easier to get to Narayana in Vaikuntha. Way easier, actually. That can be reached only by persons who are devotees of Lord Chaitanya or Lord Sri Krishna only. Indra then admitted that you have descended from that Goloka planet in the spiritual world, and the disturbance which I have created was due to my foolishness, and he therefore begged excuse from Lord Krishna. Because once again, Indra was himself dealing with that realization up to the Bhagavan realization of Krishna, but not realizing his Vigraha fully. That's the problem Indra is still dealing with to this very day, and any of us can always revert back to that. So once we get up to the realization of Krishna's position, etc., we then have to jump into realization of his form on a much deeper level. We have to. That's Vigraha realization. That's the realization level that the demigods in most cases never get to. That's why they stay within the temporal world. They get up to the Bhagavan realization max, and then they get absorbed in their own heavenly sense gratification, basically. That's usually the routine there, that how it goes. And basically, they get to the limit of intellectualizing, and they see that their intellect can't grasp Radha and Krishna beyond the intellect. So what they do then is they basically either make a choice. They can either go back to intellect or try to actually transcend that. And usually that almost requires them to have to take birth on earth first to transcend matter. Because in the heavenly worlds, it's like it creates this really, really intensely, insanely strong conditioning of the mode of goodness and maintenance. So basically identifying yourself as the maintainer of things in the material world is really thick and strong in demigods, more so than in humans, right? But the fact is we're not actually even maintainers of anything in the material world. So, cleaning things off, dusting the altar, keeping things nice, we're not even maintainers. So we're not only are we not doers, we're also not maintainers either, So the demigods understand that they're not proprietors, but they fall into the I'm the maintainer trap. That's their problem. And so we can't even think we're the maintainers of anything temporally speaking either. We have to transcend even that idea. So understanding that Radha and Krishna are maintaining stuff through us, basically. Let's see here. Now The last phase of the pastimes of Lord Krishna is described in the Srimad Bhagavatam as Maushala Lila, including the mystery of Krishna's disappearance from this material world. He played a pastime that he was killed by a hunter. There are many disruptive explanations of the last portions of Lord Krishna's pastimes, such as the description of the incarnation of his hair, and Lord Chaitanya described them in their right interpretation. Now, what's really interesting about this is there's a lot of people floating around now who are forgetting this fact that all of these astrotheological ideas, concepts, etc., come from Krishna's pastimes originally. So Krishna's actual pastimes, but now what people are trying to do in the so-called syncretic circles is they're trying to pass off, Krishna getting shot in the ankle, in the foot, is the same symbol as Achilles getting shot in the foot in the Trojan War. It's the same astrotheological symbolism, etc. Now, Krishna actually, for many reasons, part of the reason Krishna arranges those pastimes is so that those people stay duped in their speculations like that. So that mental speculators remain speculating and don't understand his pastimes. That's explained in the Bhagavatam as one of the reasons why he arranges that, making it seem like he dies like an ordinary person. And he purposefully does that to dissuade any and all doubters, speculative people who don't actually understand who he is. So Krishna literally sets all his pastimes up and everything he does in ways that could cause anybody and everyone to doubt and to get skeptic of those pastimes and relate them to something else. Like, they're just symbols, they're just this and that. And he does that on purpose, actually. So that the only ones who actually maintain the correct understanding and understand him are the ones who understand him completely, in full. And understand why he does those things and what's really going on here. So, okay. This is very interesting. As far as the incarnation of King Kamsa is concerned, this is mentioned in Srimad Bhagavatam, in the Vishnu Purana, and in Mahabharata. It is stated there that the Lord snatched from his head two kinds of hair, a gray hair and a black hair. So it looks like Kamsa had actually some gray hairs going on there, with all the stress and everything else, and the separate hairs entered into the wombs of two queens of the Yadu dynasty, namely Rohini and Devaki. It is stated there that Lord Krishna descends to this material world for vanquishing all the demons, but some say that Krishna is the incarnation of Vishnu. Now check this out. Who is lying in the ocean of milk within this universe. Srila Rupa Goswami and his commentator, Srila Baladeva Vidyabhushana, have discussed this point fully and have established the exact truth. So there's no lack of these discussions here. Sri Jiva Goswami also discussed this point in the Krishna Sandarbha. So yeah, basically, in essence, what's described here is that, let's say somebody who does really specifically think that Krishna is an avatar of Vishnu, okay, or expanding from Vishnu, and they see it like, okay, that's the order of operations, that's their consciousness. The ones who see it like that are seeing up to the point of that specific expansion, because Krishna comes into the material world, but he does so with all of those expansions, and he does so, in many cases, through those expansions of himself. So he gives every opportunity for people to think that he's coming from that expansion and that expansion is the source of his form. It's another thing he does to dissuade anyone who isn't actually wanting to fully understand him completely, basically. So, and that's what happens. A lot of people fall into that, and then they have like a lot of weird misunderstandings of the Vishnu-Krishna dynamics, etc. That simply are simply not necessary, basically, when the full situation is understood. Because when Krishna appears, of course, all of his expansions come with him, and when Krishna is functioning in his pastime of slaying demons, being God, etc., that's his Vasudeva God, and also his Vishnu function, anyway. So, basically, yeah, that's how the whole thing works there. And this is very, very interesting. Okay, Atmarama. Let's see here. Okay, check this out. The next item is Muni. And you were making some funny jokes about this before, Kakati. Where you're talking about the next item is Muni. Persons who are very great thinkers are called Muni. I skipped ahead to page 132. Sometimes this Muni is also used for persons who are very grave. Muni is also used for great sages, great austere persons, great mystics, and learned scholars. And the term Muni was referring to an individual who can exercise. This is explained in the Srimad Bhagavatam also. The word Muni also means someone who can exercise their brain and look at things from the perspectives of every different person around them. So they can look at things from the personal perspective. It's not that they buy into the philosophies, but they can literally alter their brain structure, how they process reality, into processing reality personally, or personally mixed with impersonalism, or into impersonal. And they can like shift the way their consciousness processes reality and stuff. Moonies can do that, and that's actually part of the definition of Mooney. But they still understand, they still maintain the correct understanding of the superpersonal truth. They simply are able to do that so that they can see where others are coming from in terms of, okay, how to explain to this person, the nature of Krishna, etc., how to get them to the correct understanding. It's not for the sake of a true Mooney, like in Narada Muni's case. It's not for the sake of basically, let's experiment with all the different ways we can see the absolute truth, and let's see how they're all equally true. No, it's more like, okay, let's see the actual truth, and then let's see the other ways people process truth erroneously, and immerse ourselves in that consciousness so that we can relate to them better. Basically, that's what Moonies are expert in doing. Which is why Moonies tend to be really good preachers, and which is why Narada Muni tends to be very good interacting with the asuras and demons also, because he does this. He's able to do this with his consciousness, so where he can legitimately empathize and relate without falling into the way they're thinking about things with even the asuras. So he can understand how they're thinking about things fully and processing reality and empathize with them like that. And this is Narada Muni's very unique feature about himself. Whereas many people may be pure devotees, but they can't exactly necessarily empathize fully with the psychophysical construction of another individual. They can understand in principle where the individual is coming from, but actually empathizing in that way with them, only Moonies can do that specifically. So this is why Narada Muni is welcomed by both the asuras and the demigods, whereas in most cases the demigods and many of the pure devotees aren't welcome amongst the asuras at all, except for Narada Muni and maybe a handful of others, basically. So, because they know that he's actually their friend also, legitimately so, and interacts as such. Of course, Narada Muni can't be imitated, but the point is, that's what distinguishes a Muni specifically from someone who may be a pure devotee, but not necessarily that type of Muni. So in principle, all devotees are Munis, yes, but I think you guys get what I'm trying to say here, without twisting words around too much. You know why I worship and am attracted to Narada so much? If you know the Leela from his previous life and those connections to my life. Wonderful. Yes. Yep. The Leelas, how he basically was, surrounded by all the beautiful women and stuff, Radha, and then he ended up being cursed to take birth as the little kid, interacting with the sages and stuff, and from their contact and knowledge, he became attracted devotion to Vishnu, Krishna, etc. And yep. And then he translated. And Narada Muni is a great example of this, actually. Kakati Das. We've talked about this a lot before, where he's a great example of a devotee who, even though he knows about Radha and Krishna and he understands the order of operations, he's still more attracted to, specifically in terms of preference, devotion to Lakshmi Narayana. So Narada Muni is a shining example of this, where someone who understands that Radha and Krishna expand as Vishnu and Lakshmi, or Lakshmi Vishnu, but still prefers devotion to Lakshmi Vishnu as his main overall preference, basically. Yeah. So he's a great shining example of this principle at work, actually. Where he's an individual, he doesn't need to see it the other way around. Unlike a lot of people claim, it's because that's the thing. I warn so many people against that and caution them, because it's like you end up running into a lot of strange things a lot of times, where, and then what ends up happening is that, and then with that always tends to come along with like weird, very subtle Brahmavadi tinges and preaching and things like that that people usually don't recognize are there, because they think that, because I'm more attracted to Vishnu, or I prefer that, then I have to see that Vishnu is a sort of Krishna, period, and I can never see that Krishna is a sort, But the whole point there is, like, there's great examples of pure devotees who have a preference towards Vishnu, but who know Krishna is the source of Vishnu, in terms of form, without any problems whatsoever. Just like I tend to prefer devotion to Balaram and Rohini Devi, even though I know Krishna is the source. It has nothing to do with me, appreciating Krishna's form less, or seeing that Balarama is the source of Krishna's form or anything like that. No, it's just that, that's just naturally the preference, basically, that tends to be there. He saw Krishna once at the beginning of his previous incarnation and spent the rest of his life trying to see Krishna again. Next life, he was born as Narada. There you go. Exactly. Boom. So, let's see here. Urukrama. And honestly, I'd be really interested to see how that all went too, because I know like there's a lot of similar stories that have been related to where like a lot of times somebody will come to like the Gaudiya Krishna understanding, and then yeah, exactly. Basically, I'm just doing this as a relational example and things like this because like I was saying, the idea that like when someone thinks that Vishnu is specifically the source of Radha and Krishna, and on top of that they're more attracted to Radha and Krishna, then you end up with some really weird, strange stuff that goes on in terms of philosophical changes and things like this, which I'm sure you ran into and experienced these things to one degree or another. But yeah, the point being there, it's like, yeah, attraction to Radha Krishna is perfect, wonderful, but then it just makes it that much easier to understand the order of operations. It's like, well, okay, if someone's preference is to Radha and Krishna anyway, then it makes it that much more convenient to understand how they are the source of Vishnu, etc. Where it tends to be more challenging when people have a preference towards Lakshmi and Narayana, for them to understand that preference will actually increase understanding the order of operations with Radha Krishna, because they get in their heads like, I don't understand how that could increase at all. It's so yeah, a lot of stuff like that goes on. But thankfully, we have the Lord Chaitanya himself and the previous acharyas, etc., clarifying all these things for us. So let's see, fully transcendental. The word Hari has different meanings, of which two are peripherals. Hari means that he takes away all inauspicious things from the devotee's life, and that he attracts the mind of the devotee by awarding him transcendental love of Godhead. So Hari means takes away everything that's inauspicious and gives that which is purely auspicious. So we experience a lot of times loss in life, things that get taken away from us, misfortune, etc. The Krishna only takes away things in ways that will increase our attraction to him and increase our direct intimacy with him. So you'll notice that Krishna never takes away anything that actually decreases attraction or intimacy or interest in him. Always the opposite. Every time something's lost or taken, it increases that attraction. And if Krishna gives one something, it's always in a way that increases the attraction to him, to Radha and Krishna. Always. This is if one is actually purely devotionally inclined in their heart and mind. Now, for someone who is mixed devotionally inclined, Krishna may sometimes give them things that actually won't necessarily increase their attraction to Radha and Krishna, or to him in particular, and then things that could potentially mislead that individual. But in the case of one who's actually inclined towards pure devotion, well, many times we experience a lot of loss, but we also experience a lot of amazing rewards as well, along with that loss too. They're always overrule the loss, actually, but it's always a case-by-case basis, of course. Here are the Narada Bhakti Sutras. I have read them, but I don't remember exactly what they said 100%. As much as I love and respect Narada, and he's amazing. He's in so many pastimes. I've never, that's what's the way to word it. I guess, yeah, like personally, my emphasis has always kind of been on certain other devotees of Radha and Krishna in terms of what I've read, what I've interacted with, etc., things like that. But yeah, Narada's everywhere. He's amazing. You find him in Radha and Krishna's pastimes. You find him in the 1,000 Names of Sri Radha. You find him in practically all the Vishnu pastimes. You find him in all the Krishna pastimes too, all over the place. And it's just talking to the asuras, the demigods. Just Narada Muni gets around, man. He really gets around. Very cool. Okay, let's see here. Okay, let's see here. Yeah. Maybe is there a link maybe to the Narada Bhakti Sutras you might be able to post up here? Link for people to check out. Like get on. That'd be awesome. Let's see here. Oh yes, that was the thing I wanted to emphasize too. Back and reading it. He's the best Bhakti for all. Yeah. Okay. Definitely make a point to read it again. So as far as this goes, basically Was it the forms? Oh, this is very cool. Yeah, this is very cool here. So, sometimes one becomes attracted to Krishna and his transcendental qualities simply by looking upon the beautiful features of his transcendental body. And in that case, also, one gives up the desire for liberation and becomes engaged in the devotional service of the Lord. The devotee repents his loss of time in the so-called cultivation of knowledge and becomes a pure devotee of the Lord. And I would like to clarify and make note that that cultivation of knowledge involves cultivation of knowledge about Krishna also. It's inclusive within that. So we're talking about formful pure devotion here, where knowledge becomes like a follow-along, a tag-along, instead of something that's sought after as a separate focus anymore. Yeah, very cool. Okay, let's see here. Oh, this is very cool, man. Check this out. This is what I keep talking about. This syncretic Brahmavadi stuff we keep talking about all the time. It's also here in Chaitanya Charitamrita. So, it's amazing. So in the cultivation of knowledge, there are two kinds of transcendentalists. One of them is the worship of the impersonal Brahman, and the other is the desire of liberation. Monists worship the impersonal feature of Brahman, and therefore they are called the worshippers of Brahman. The worshippers of Brahman are divided into three further categories, the three types of Brahmavadi. The neophyte practitioner, one who is absorbed in Brahman realization, and one who has actually realized himself as Brahman. If devotional service is added, the knower of Brahman can then become liberated, otherwise there is no possibility. So what's really interesting about this is even to attain going into the Brahma Jyoti, etc., you have to have that mixed with some degree of devotional service to Krishna, formfully, specifically, on some level or another. So it's like those who have basically supposedly realized Brahman, but not appreciate on any level whatsoever the forms of Krishna or Vishnu, can't even make it to the Brahma Jyoti. It's incredible. Like a lot of people think, oh, you can make it to the Brahma Jyoti if you realize Brahman, but don't specifically understand to some degree the forms of Krishna. No, actually you have to understand on some level or another, or people have to understand, I should say, even if they're going the Brahman route of impersonal realization, etc., even then they have to realize, thanks, yes, I appreciate it. Even then they have to actually realize, to some degree, and appreciate on some level the forms of Krishna or Vishnu as being eternal. Even if they see them on a completely concocted wrong level, there has to be some degree of devotion there to their forms to even attain the Brahma Jyoti, which is the light shining from their forms. So you basically so check this. I love this. Anyone who is fully engaged in devotional service in Krishna consciousness is understood to be already a soul realized in Brahman. Devotional service is so strong that one is attracted to Krishna even from the process of Brahman worship. When he says, in this case, even from, he's talking about being pulled out of from the process of Brahman worship. So from there to Krishna worship. The Lord awards such a devotee the perfection of his spiritual body, and he is eternally engaged in the transcendental quality of Krishna. And elsewhere, he explains and clarifies the spiritual body is eternal, and it's not something you get. That it literally is you, inherently with you. Okay. Yeah. So, for example, the four Kumars and Sukadeva Goswami were liberated souls from the very beginning, and still later in life they became attracted to the pastimes of Krishna, and they became devotees. Let's see here. Yeah. So it talks about that specifically. Sometimes one becomes attracted to his transcendental qualities simply by looking upon the beautiful features of his transcendental body, and then in that case, the devotee repents his loss in time of so-called cultivation of knowledge and becomes a pure devotee of the Lord. So that's like the quickest way to become obsessed with Krishna is becoming attracted to his form, his body specifically, bodily features, which is the path the gopis take. And get there very quickly. Let's see here. Whereas those who take the path of, okay, I want to learn about Krishna first, then become gradually more attracted to his body, that takes a lot longer. Then it's basically jnana with bhakti, gradually needing to basically shut off the jnana side to get to jnana shunya bhakti, which Lord Chaitanya encourages us in. And a lot of people have the wrong idea. They think, it's funny actually, some people, they have the idea that like jnana shunya bhakti means bhakti without knowledge, in the sense of lacking information or something. That's not at all what it means. It just means that the pursuit of jnana as a thing is no longer a thing anymore. It's just like jnana is just already there, and your devotion is completely independent also of that jnana anyway. And pure because it's fixated on their forms, Radha and Krishna's forms, Vigraha realization, which is beyond knowledge and consciousness, even beyond even consciousness. Yeah, but people who think this this weird thing like, oh, Jnana Shunya Bhakti means you just love Krishna spontaneously, but you don't necessarily know anything about him one way or the other. That's not what it means exactly. It means you know so much about him that you're beyond knowledge altogether. That's what it means. You basically know more than knowledge knows that knowledge is able to give you. So yeah, and then of course Krishna is Para Brahman, the source of Brahman. Let's see here. Anyone who is not attracted to Krishna specifically is understood to still be under the spell of Maya. Therefore, one who is trying to be liberated by devotional service is actually liberated from the spell of Maya. Let's see here. Yeah, so I mean, the teachings of Lord Chaitanya are just great, so amazing, because they go in so much detail on all of these points regarding everything we ever talk about. In fact, is right here in the teachings of Lord Chaitanya. It's almost, it's almost a cry and shame that not more people read the teachings of Lord Chaitanya. In fact, it would really. Man, it'd save a lot of time discussion-wise, etc. Things like that. We could really delve in more on the forms of Radha and Krishna specifically and things like that, which I definitely will be doing, but I've really been wanting to emphasize and get people more attracted to the expansions of Krishna in a genuine, real sense. So that's why I'm focusing on his expansions now, and Vishnu and Lakshmi and Vishnu and things like this. For many reasons, because I genuinely want people to love their expansions more, and on top of that, not only that, but to help people understand that in the International Harinama Sankirtana movement, anybody who comes in, that we're not weird fanatic Radha and Krishna only and no other expansion type devotees. No, we're very much about Krishna's expansions also, very much so, genuinely. And so people understanding that that's here, we have that here in our movement and in our family and in our amongst ourselves together who are doing this. It's important that we do emphasize the expansions of Krishna and Vishnu and this stuff. Very important, actually, because it goes both ways. By appreciating them more, people appreciate Radha and Krishna more, and vice versa. By appreciating Radha and Krishna more, you appreciate their expansions more. They go hand in hand. You don't appreciate one less and one more, ever. The appreciation goes together. Oh, dude, this is very interesting. This was actually put in hyphens by Prabhupada. Now, he does this when something is extremely important. Most of the scripture he doesn't put in hyphenations when it's English. He puts usually only Sanskrit words. But he says right here, this is very interesting. The doctrine of transformation of state, check this out, is accepted when one thing is mistaken for another. Now, this actually applies to people thinking about the living entity. So, actually, the body is not the living entity, and to accept the body as the living entity is the doctrine of transformation of state. Every conditioned soul is undoubtedly contaminated by this doctrine of transformation of state. This is referring obviously to both the physical body and the mental subtle body. So what's interesting about this is people thinking about the living entity situation, right? Trying to understand, okay, how does living being enter matter, etc. If they're a conditioned soul still, or if their consciousness is still conditioned, they're going to be thinking about that in terms of transformation of state. So, okay, the living entity starts somewhere, and then this happens, and this happens, without understanding living entity in Svarupa and Goloka eternally, past, present, and future. But with the conditioned consciousness, we'll always look at things in terms of a cause and effect order of operations. Okay, this happens, then this happens, then this happens. See? And that's simply the conditional consciousness at work, thinking in terms of like, okay, A, B, C in that order, relating to things that are actually eternal, in the sense of like a time order or a, that type of thing. So it's very interesting that he hyphenated that, actually, out of all this scripture. Okay. Yeah, this is very interesting. The conditional state of the living entity is a diseased condition. Yeah, they are. They're afraid, and that's very interesting. We talked about that before, remember, like in depth, why people are afraid of that stuff. And it's a very erroneous fear. That's actually the truth, Kakadi Das. Yeah, and even fewer read Chaitanya Charitamrita. Even me myself, I've read through Chaitanya Charitamrita mostly. I still have to read through it from start to finish all the way through, though. Even myself, I still have to do that. And the purports. And even after that, more deeply realizing everything that's being said. But yeah, I mean, what to speak of that, barely anybody's even read the Bhagavatam all the way through, aside from just classes. And here's the thing. Very soon, when we have a more formal temple setup, once I get physical locations established for this, where we'll have physical discussions, right, within the IHSM fold, we'll basically, I'm going to run, in most cases, I'm going to run Bhagavatam lectures quicker, to where you're going to basically have multiple verses covered, like faster settings, basically, to where instead of just one verse at a time, and then the whole class is a discussion on one verse, it's going to be more like, okay, like a huge chunk of chapter, and then the discussion is on that. So this way people can cover huge, fast amounts of ground quick. Because I noticed that, like a lot of times, people, their knowledge of Bhagavatam will just be, okay, this class or that class or this class. And unfortunately, in more cases than not, unknowingly, a lot of like Brahmabadi Chin stuff is being preached and taught without people even knowing it, simply because there's a lot of unreadness there going on. Yeah, and it's a big, very, very common issue in temple lectures, circuits, and things like that. Very big, very common issue of people not having read the Bhagavatam themselves, independently of the classes, basically. So originally, the living entity and the original cause of this cosmic manifestation are certainly not in the state of transformation. But mistaken thoughts and arguments can overcome a person when he forgets about the inconceivable energies and activities of the Supreme Lord. Even the mature orbiter are many examples. So basically, yeah, people who try to go in circles about the living entity's origin, it's just very simple. If you just take it at face value, what Krishna explains, yeah, we're with him eternally in Goloka, in our Svarupa there, because that's eternal, that's the deepest truth, that's where we are, that's the highest state. So, but trying to like intellectualize it in some other way, it just never works. People go around in circles, basically. Let's see here. Alrighty. Let's see here. And what's really interesting about this, the inconceivableness factor, isn't actually talking about him being personal and impersonal. A lot of people mistake this. No, it's actually referring to, what he does is beyond knowledge and consciousness altogether, etc., and the inconceivableness of how he actually goes about doing stuff like this. Inconceivableness of his actual personal nature, specifically. Yeah, it's amazing. He goes into all these little different arguments that people have back and forth on this stuff. And let's see here. For the talks with Prakashananda. But yeah, check out that play, the Chaitanya, the Mahaprakash. That play. If you type the Mahaprakash, Chaitanya Mahaprakash, those two plays will come up every time I watch those, man. Every single time. I go into tears when I actually watch the whole thing towards the end. It's because Chaitanya's in them, It's because Chaitanya transfers his ecstatic feelings towards the devotees who watch that play. His presence is in that play. It's amazing. I've looked at a lot of different plays, and I haven't seen any play that's to that degree of, like, his presence in them. Other plays do have his presence in them, make no doubt about it, and have those effects also. But that one is just, like, consistent, consistently inducing of ecstatic symptoms, consistently, watching it. Very consistent. Let's see here. And there's always something to that. When something consistently induces ecstatic symptoms when you're in private, that's something that's very significant with Chaitanya's presence there. Now, what's really interesting about this, I did cover it before, but I want to go more elaborately on Chaitanya and Nityananda's forms in another video. Basically, I felt horrible about it too. I really did. Like I felt terrible. That like I felt like I had accidentally misled people to wrongly think, which was not my intention, that like, there was something bad in and of itself about chanting Gauranga or Nitai Gauranga. And that's never the point I was trying to make. And in fact, the other point I was trying to make, I shouldn't have even wasted time with anyway. But it was just basically because Lord Chaitanya understood what I was trying to do, but he's given me a better way to go about explaining it to people. So basically what I was getting at before was that chanting Chaitanya's and Nityananda's names specifically, and continually chanting their names like this, is very good. But the point I was making before is if somebody's intention in doing that, right, is to mix, if their purpose in doing so is to mix up the Harinama Sankirtan and not specifically to glorify Lord Chaitanya genuinely, then that's a problem. Then it's better to stay chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. And it just seems to me that a lot of people that was the purpose in why they were chanting Nitai Gauranga. But the point is, and I've realized this on a much deeper level now, and it's really hit home on me much deeper, that even if a person's intention is to mix up the Maha Mantra, it's still all purifying to chant Chaitanya's names and Nityananda's names still. And they'll eventually come around to chanting their names for the right reason, basically, in pure, genuine devotion. But it really, the point is, it's like, even though my intention wasn't in the least trying to offend someone or analyze or anything like this, still, it's like just like any amount at all of like criticizing somebody, even on a subconscious level, that you don't even know is happening, even though that's your purpose, is still like unnecessarily harmful to devotional service and enthusiasm and things like this. And there's like criticism can go so deep and so subtle to where you almost can't even spot the darn thing, And it's very interesting. So Chaitanya, I talked with him about it, and I said, this is my purpose, this is my intention, but I feel like I offended some of your devotees in that I microanalyzed their intentions, which I shouldn't have done. So the point that he was getting across is like, yes, I understand what you're trying to relay to others, but remember yourself, though, that microanalyzing others' intentions can very easily be within the realm of offensive if there's any trace of you on a subconscious level seeing your intentions as more genuine than theirs. Basically, is what he came across and made clear to me. And so it's interesting, actually, that very point. So when I was using people as examples for that, I basically was just like, okay, I'm trying to explain this, but that's not the best way to go about showing examples for this, because it may mislead people thinking that, oh, those people chanting are insincere chanters or something, or their intentions are wrong. And it just gives people a wrong idea, other than what I was trying to get across, basically. So, oh, check this out. This is amazing, man. We were just talking about this. I've highlighted all these points in here, actually. So check this out. Beginningless means that conditional life exists prior to the creation. Prior to the creation. It is simply manifested with and after the creation. Very, very key here. So let's see here. Okay. Maya means that which is not. It has no existence. Say that again. Maya means that which is not. It has no existence. So, and Prabhupada says very clear, there is no material world in reality. There literally is only Goloka Vrindavana, period. And then the branch-offs of the Goloka, Vaikuntha, etc. This is very interesting. When living entity becomes forgetful of the constitutional nature of his relationship with God, then he is at once overwhelmed by the external energy, and this is the cause of his false ego, identifying his body as himself, which includes identifying your set of desires as yourself also, which is the subtle body as yourself. Identification. Yep. Let's see here. Hey, welcome, Robin. Glad to have you with us, man. So, oh boy. It's saying, can you guys still hear me? Let me know if you can still hear me, because my darn computer keeps saying I'm logged off when I'm not actually logged off. This has been happening quite often the last couple days. So, can you guys hear me? Let's see here. Let me type this out. Yeah, there seems to be some